Most people think joint mobility is all about flexibility, that you feel less stiffness, less discomfort, making it easier to get on and off the floor, reaching overhead. But what if the biggest benefit of joint mobility has nothing to do with joint itself? What if every time you improve the quality of movement in a joint, you're actually changing the quality of information your brain receives? And if that information changes, your attention changes, your balance changes, your confidence changes, your ability to learn changes. Even the ability to make decisions can change because the brain does not experience the world directly. It experiences information, and your joints are constantly providing it. The problem is that most people never think about mobility from that perspective. They think about muscles, stretching, tightness, aging, wear and tear. Meanwhile, the brain is sitting really upstream of all of it, trying to make sense of the information coming from your body. And when that information becomes less clear, less accurate, less varied, the brain begins operating with a less complete map. And that's important because that doesn't happen overnight, it happens gradually. The shoulder just moves a little less, the neck turns just a little less, the ankles become a little stiffer, the spine kind of stops moving in different positions. And one small change doesn't seem that important, but years later, those small reductions kind of add up, and most people assume they're just aging. What if they are often experiencing is really loss of information, loss of movement option, loss of sensory richness, less of signals the brain depends on to understand the body. And that cost of that loss extends far beyond movement. It can influence energy level, focus, coordination, confidence, adaptability, and even how safe or threatened the brain perceives kind of like the world around you. But here's the exciting part. If reduced movement can decrease information, improved movement can also increase it. That's the cool part. So that's why joint mobility is one of the most underrated tools for brain health, performance, and longevity. Not because mobility is anything magical, but because mobility is communication. Every joint movement is a conversation between your body and your brain. And the question is, how good is that conversation? And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. And I'll show you 3 super fun exercises that you can follow along to. Welcome, I'm Heike Fallon. I'm the founder of Expand Health and the creator of the NeuroHP Method. I combine neuroscience, sports therapy, and personal performance coaching to help leaders, athletes, active people that don't want to be limited, help them to optimize their health and personal performance for longevity. And I've studied over 30 years the brain, the body, and their connection, and it's just so fascinating when we look at it from a brain-based approach. So today I want to share how joint mobility exercise can enhance brain function in ways most people don't really realize. Before we go into it, make sure you download my free PDF. There's a link in the description. Check it out. And now, when most people hear the word mobility, they immediately think about movement. I want you to think about it more like navigation, because that's really what the brain is doing. The brain is constantly navigating gravity, navigating space, uncertainty, tasks, decisions, the environment. To do that effectively, it needs maps. And those maps are never finished. So it has a map, the brain has maps of everything in there, and it's continuously updating through sensory inputs. And one of the richest sources of that input comes from your joints. Inside every joint there are specialized receptors. These receptors detect where position, movement, speed, direction, pressure, change. Every time a joint moves, those receptors send information upward and the brain receives it. It processes it, compares it, predicts from it, and updates its internal model of the body. That's important. Think of it. It's kind of like a GPS system, right? If a GPS stops receiving updates, Navigation becomes less precise. Not immediately, but gradually, the same thing can happen inside your nervous system. The less movement variability you experience, the fewer updates the brain receives, and the less detailed its map can become. This doesn't mean you suddenly forget how to move. It means the brain has fewer references, fewer options, less confidence, less prediction. And when the brain becomes less certain, it often becomes more protective. Not because something is damaged, because uncertainty requires cautions, because it's supposed to keep us alive. And this is one of the biggest ideas within the NeuroHP method. Your body is not simply responding to structure, it's responding to perception. The brain makes decisions based on the information it receives. And mobility training can dramatically influence that information. But there's another layer that makes this even more interesting, because mobility isn't only about creating movement, it's also about creating attention. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to think about 10 things at exactly the same time? Your brain prioritizes, it allocates resources, it decides what deserves attention. When movement options shrink, more resources are often directed towards managing limitations, towards compensation, towards stability, towards protection. It's like a company spending all its budget on fixing problems instead of creating growth. The more resources required for protection, the fewer resources available for performance. Mobility can help change that equation, not by forcing the brain, but by giving it better information. And better information, again, changes decisions. That's where we're heading next. Because once you understand how the brain builds its body maps, you'll never look at joint mobility the same way again. So most people separate physical performance from mental performance. The brain doesn't. From the brain's perspective, everything competes for the same resources: balance, movement, attention, decision-making, problem-solving. They all draw from the same system. Think about what happens if you're walking across an icy parking lot, right? You're not checking your emails at the same time. You're not planning your next week's schedule. You're not thinking about your dinner. Your attention narrows, and the brain allocates resources towards staying upright. Survival first. That's what the brain is designed for. Everything else is second. Now, obviously, walking across ice is an extreme example, but the principle exists on a spectrum, right? Anytime the brain has to dedicate additional resources to managing movement, stability, or uncertainty, those resources are unavailable elsewhere. So this is where joint mobility becomes really interesting, because mobility can improve efficiency, not necessarily by making you stronger, by reducing the amount of work the brain must do to organize that movement. So think about it, a well-run business, right? If every department is functioning efficiently, leadership can focus on growth, innovation, and strategies. But if every department has a problem, leaders spend all day putting out fires. Your brain works remarkably in a similar way. When movement becomes less efficient, more resources are directed towards management. More monitoring, more correction, more prediction, more compensation. And over time, that can contribute to the feeling many people know well: mental fatigue. Not because they're weak, not because they lack motivation, because the system is spending energy where it doesn't need to. And one reason people often feel more mentally refreshed after a mobility session isn't simply that they moved, it's that the brain received an opportunity to update how it organizes the movement. And when organization improves, efficiency improves. And when efficiency improves, capacity increases. And capacity is one of the most important longevity metrics you can have. So because longevity is not simply living longer, it's maintaining the ability to do what matters for as long as possible. But there's another reason joint mobility matters. And it's one that has nothing to do with flexibility. It has to do with learning, actually, because every time you move in a way that requires attention, your brain has an opportunity to adapt. So let me show you what I mean. So let's, for example, do an exercise here. We're going to do what's called the alphabet challenge. So choose one shoulder. I'm going to show you from the side. So we're going to go through the alphabet. Don't worry, we're not going to go through the full one. We're going to do a few letters. Going to start with A. So when you stand sideways, think of like an A going up, down, and we're going to go for the bar. Then we're going to go B. Go up, back, and around. And the second one, that was your B. Coming up for the C, so come in here, and I'm going to do it this way around. Now a D would be up, and one big down. So that was like drawing the alphabet. You can keep going. Take your time and notice what happens. Some letters feel easy, others feel maybe a little awkward. Some require movements that you really use. Some require more concentration than you expected. And keep going, for really like a good minute or two. And then you stop, and most people discover something very interesting. The challenge wasn't physical. The challenge was neurological. So your shoulder wasn't getting stronger during those 2 minutes. Your brain was paying attention. And it had to create new movement solutions, new coordination patterns, and new relationships between intention and action. And that's important because learning doesn't only happen when you read a book or take a course or learning a language. Learning happens when your brain is required to solve new patterns, new problems, right? Mobility exercise can create exactly that kind of opportunity. Not because they're hard, because they're different, and different gets the brain attention. One of the fastest ways to become limited is to stop exposing yourself to new experiences, new environments, new challenges, new movements. The brain loves efficiency, but longevity requires adaptability, and adaptability requires continued learning. Mobility training, when approached as more like exploration instead of exercise, becomes a way to keep the process more alive, not just in your joints, but in your brain. And that brings us to something even more important, because learning is only valuable if it expands what you're capable of doing. So let's zoom out for a moment, because this isn't really just about the shoulder, your hip, your ankle. It's about options. Think about the activities you enjoy today, right? You might like hiking. I love hiking. I love skiing. I love traveling. Playing pickleball. Maybe it's as simple as being like moving freely throughout the day. None of those activities depend on a single joint. They depend on the brain that it can coordinate thousands of movements without you having to think about them. And that's easy to forget, because when movement works well, you really notice it, right? We simply live our lives, we go where we want, we do what we want, we trust our body to respond. But over time, something interesting can happen. People often start reducing their world, not intentionally, but gradually. They stop taking certain trails, they avoid certain activities, they become more cautious with certain movements, not because they've made a decision to live smaller, because their brain has become less confident in its ability to handle the unexpected. So slippery surfaces, right? Uneven trails, a quick change in direction, a movement they haven't made in years. This is one reason I believe longevity is not just about keeping your body healthy, it's also about maintaining the ability to engage with life, to participate, to explore, to remain capable, curious, and remain willing, and mobility can support that process. So not because mobility prevents aging, nothing does, but because mobility helps maintaining something incredible, valuable. Movement choices, the ability to move differently, respond differently, adapt differently. And when you regularly explore different joint positions, different ranges, different movement possibilities, you remind the brain that options still exist. And options matter because limitations rarely arrive again overnight. It often arrives when we slowly stop using the possibilities that were available all along. So the goal of mobility isn't to become more impressive, right? The goal is to remain capable of adapting, capable of participating, capable of saying yes to the things you want to do. So let's do another exercise. This one, you're gonna just stand nice and tall. You're gonna just move your arm into one direction. So I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna just point at something. I got a little specific point right now, so I'm pointing at it. Okay, pay attention to where your arm is, feel where your arm is, because now you're going to bring your arm back and you're going to close your eyes, and now going to try to point at the same direction with your eyes closed. Now you're going to open your eyes. I was a little off, so I'm going to move over right there. Okay, let's do that again. Now I'm going to choose something crossbody. That might be a little harder, okay? So we're going to point first with eyes open at something. Good. Kind of feel where your body is, where your arm is. Then you bring your arm back. You're going to close your eyes and reach out and point again. Open eyes, correct if you need to. I was a little off there. And bring it back. You can bring it overhead or whatever different positions you would like. So most people discover something very interesting. The position they thought they remembered is often different from the position they actually created. Like I said, I was a little bit off. Sometimes a little different, sometimes a lot. So were you a lot off? Why? Because this exercise isn't really testing your shoulder, it's testing your awareness. More specifically, it's testing how accurately your brain knows where your body is in space. This ability is called proprioception. It's often referred to as your body's internal GPS. The better that system works, the more accurately the brain can monitor and control movement. Every joint contributes information to that system. Every movement provides feedback. And every time you challenge yourself to sense position more accurately, you're asking the brain to pay closer attention. That's one reason mobility training can be so valuable, right? You're not just simply improving movement, you're improving awareness. And awareness is where better movement begins. Because before the brain can change anything, it first has to know, what's exactly happening, what's actually happening. The more accurately it can sense the body, the more effectively it can control the body. And that relationship becomes increasingly important throughout life, not just for performance, not just for exercise, but for navigating the world confidently, efficiently, and safely. Here's something most people never consider. Your brain is making movement decisions all day long, thousands of them. How far to step, right? How quickly to turn, how much force to use when you open a door, right? Where to place your foot, how to navigate around obstacles. Most of these decisions happen automatically, but they still depend on one thing: information. The brain can only make decisions with the information it has available. And think about walking on an uneven trail, right? Even every step requires constant adjustments. The brain is evaluating, where's the ground, how stable is the surface, how should I respond? And it does all of this in a fraction of a second, like super fast. Joint mobility helps support that process because every time a joint moves, the brain receives feedback. And the more accurately it understands the body, the more effectively it can guide the body. So that's one reason mobility becomes increasingly valuable as we age. Not because life stops challenging us, because it doesn't. The world remains unpredictable. A curb, staircase, slippery surface, misstepped. The brain is constantly adapting, constantly responding, constantly making decisions, and better information supports better decision. Which brings us to our final exercise, because this next exercise ties together everything we've discussed today. So this one is called One Task, 3 Solutions. And It's kind of a little bit of challenge. So this one is really about awareness and about more options. So I challenge you to get down to the floor and come up in 3 different ways, completely different ways. That's the challenge. Now, if you struggle with going down to the floor and coming back up, you can also do something like standing and reaching for a water bottle 3 different ways. You might reach this way, you might reach the way back, or whatever you come up with. Creativity is what you want to do. So, but I'm going to do the different ways of going up and down. So I'm going to show you 2 right now. And then the 3rd one, I want you to come up on your own. So here are 2 versions of going down to the floor and coming back up. Did you find another solution, a 3rd one, to have 3 different strategies? Again, this is the same task, but different answers. Now think about what just happened. Most people assume mobility is about getting into a position, but mobility is really about having options. The brain loves options because options create that adaptability, and adaptability is one of the most valuable skills, as I said, for both performance and longevity. And life really presents the exact same challenge, the exact same way. The terrain changes, the environment changes, your body changes, the situation changes. So the brain is constantly asking, what is the best solution right now? The more movement options you have available, the more solutions the brain can choose from. And that's one of the hidden benefits of mobility training. So you're not simply expanding the range of motion of, let's say, your shoulder, right? You're expanding possibilities. You're giving the brain more choices, more strategies, more ways to interact with the world around you. And over time, those options matter because limitations really begin when we lose everything. We often begin, as I said, gradually losing the choices. When fewer movements feel available, when fewer activities feel comfortable, when fewer possibilities feel realistic, mobility training helps you push back against the process. Not by forcing the body, by continuing to expose the brain and variety, to exploration, to possibilities. And that brings us to the most important idea from today's video, because this was never really about becoming more flexible. It was never about touching your toes or achieving a perfect squat or increasing a certain number of degrees in a specific joint. Those things can be useful, but they are not the biggest story. The biggest story is this: your brain depends on movement, not just for exercise, not just for fitness, but for information, for learning, awareness, adaptation. Every time you move a joint, the brain receives input. Every time you explore a new position, the brain receives an opportunity to learn. Every time you challenge awareness, the brain has a chance to become more precise. And every time you expand that movement option, you expand options for the system that controls movement. So that's why joint mobility exercise can enhance brain function, not because they directly make you smarter, but because they help the brain to do what it does best: sense, learn, adapt, and respond. Make sure to share this video with anyone that you think would benefit from this. Subscribe to my channel because I always upload new content to my channel and you don't want to miss out on some more brain-based approach exercises. I'm Heike Fallon and I hope you'll start investing in yourself today. You deserve it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.